My boss didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He just leaned back in his chair, folded his hands, and said, "Either support what I'm doing or pack your things and leave today." I smiled. Not because I agreed, because something in me finally snapped awake. I closed my notebook, grabbed my briefcase, and realized this wasn't a workday anymore. It was a line. I should probably tell you how I ended up in that chair, staring at a man who could fire me with a single email. I'm Daniel, 34, mid-level financial analyst in a mid-sized company that likes to call itself family-oriented on LinkedIn and lean in every budget review. My life wasn't glamorous. Same parking spot, same lukewarm coffee, same screensavers on monitors older than some interns. Nothing dramatic. That's what makes this story believable. Nothing felt dangerous until it suddenly was. Carter, my boss, had always been a results-first guy. He wasn't the kind who yells. He's the kind who smiles politely while sliding a responsibility across the table like a bill you never asked for. To upper management, he was charming. Down here in the open space trenches, he was a man who liked shortcuts a little too much. The first time he crossed a line, it didn't even look like a line. It was one of those late nights where the office lights hum louder than the people. He leaned over my desk and said, "Hey, can you adjust the Q3 forecast? Nothing crazy. Just smooth out the dip. Board doesn't need to panic over noise." Noise, he called it. I told myself it was harmless. Everyone massages numbers a bit. At least that's the lie you tell yourself when you want to go home before midnight. Then came the vendor, a preferred supplier we'd never used before. Higher prices, vague invoices, no details on deliverables. Carter kept pushing contracts their way, calling it strategic alignment. I asked once, just once, why we were funneling so much money to them. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just gave me this calm look, like a parent talking to a stubborn kid, because it helps everyone meet their goals. Don't overthink it. That was his mantra. Don't overthink it. Don't overstep. Don't question the man who controls your performance review. For months I played the part. I hit my deadlines. I stayed late. I brought him numbers polished enough to pass at first glance, but honest enough that I could sleep. Every time he nudged toward something that felt wrong, I nudged back just enough to avoid the cliff. But cliffs have a way of finding you. The morning everything broke started like any other. Gray sky, dead elevator button, the sound of keyboards tapping out the rhythm of corporate survival. I had barely set my bag down when Carter appeared at the edge of my cubicle. Conference room, now. No greeting, no explanation, just the tone of a man who'd already decided something. He closed the blinds the moment we walked in. That alone told me the conversation wasn't procedural. He placed a folder on the table, thin, precise, printed like a legal document someone had rehearsed many times. "This," he said, tapping it, "is the revised quarterly report I'll be submitting. I need you to sign off on the numbers." I skimmed through it once, and then again. Entire sections were inflated. Projected revenue from deals I knew didn't exist. Profit margins polished to a shine that bordered on fiction. Expenses shuffled like a deck of cards. "This isn't the real data," I said. "It's the data we're presenting," he corrected. When I didn't respond, he leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You're smart. You know how this works. Every company does this. But if this makes you uncomfortable, we can go another direction." He paused, long enough that I felt the trap snap closed. "You can either support this or resign today, voluntarily, quietly," he said quietly, like it was a gift. My chest tightened, not with panic, but with a strange, cold clarity. I thought about the mortgage, the student loan I was finally close to paying off, the parents I send a little money to every month, the job market that eats people like me alive. He waited for my fear. Instead, I felt something settle inside me, like the moment before a storm when the air goes still. I closed my notebook, reached for my briefcase, stood up slowly. He smiled, assuming he'd won. But I wasn't leaving because he told me to. I was leaving because something in me finally refused to bend. I walked to the door. My hand was on the handle when he said quietly, "Think carefully. Decisions like this follow you." I didn't turn around. "Oh," I said, "I'm counting on it." When I stepped back into the hallway, the office noise felt different, like everyone was typing inside a bubble I had just stepped out of. But the strange thing, I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. I walked to my desk, set my briefcase down, and opened my computer as if nothing had happened. But inside, I knew the truth. The moment he gave me that ultimatum, I stopped being the obedient employee he trained me to be. I hadn't decided yet whether I was walking away or staying to fight. But what I did know, what I felt down to the bone, was this. What happened in that room wasn't the end. It was the beginning. I didn't quit that day. I wish I could say I walked out with some cinematic speech. But real life doesn't pay you for dramatic exits. It pays you for staying just long enough to be useful. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and the lights off. Just the glow of the screen and the hum of the fridge. My briefcase was on the chair beside me like a second person at the table. I'd brought the folder home. I wasn't supposed to, but Carter had given it to me like it was already mine to carry. The numbers stared back at me. Inflated revenue projections tagged as likely. Expected savings from contracts we hadn't even signed. A risk note section that read more like a sales pitch than a warning. I knew how it should look. I'd built the honest version 3 days earlier. Mortgage draft email in one tab. Spreadsheets in another. My parents' names in my banking app. Those automatic transfers I'd set up years ago. I could feel the shape of my life pressed against this decision. My phone buzzed. A message from my mother. "How's work, Danny? Don't forget to rest." I stared at it for a long second before typing back. "Busy, but okay." It was a lie, technically. But I wasn't ready to explain that my boss had asked if I preferred fraud or unemployment. The next morning, I walked into the office like nothing had happened. You'd be surprised how easy it is to act normal when you're not sure yet if you're the one who's crazy. Carter was already there, door half open. He didn't call me in. He just looked up once as I passed and then back at his screen. Message received. The ball was in my court. Around 10, I made my first move. Not against him, against the idea that I was trapped. I sent an email to compliance. Neutral subject line, neutral language. Question regarding reporting thresholds. I didn't name him. I didn't accuse anyone. I just laid out a hypothetical scenario in careful, boring sentences. What if projected revenue is being consistently overstated to meet guidance? What if a specific vendor is receiving unusual volume at non-competitive rates? What is the recommended internal channel to raise concerns? They replied an hour later with a link to a policy PDF and a line that might as well have been written by a robot. We encourage employees to speak first with their line manager and document any concerns. You may also submit an anonymous report through the ethics portal. Speak first with your line manager. In other words, go back to the man who handed you the loaded gun and ask him if it's safe. At lunch, I sat in my car instead of the break room. I searched the ethics portal on my phone. It looked like every corporate reporting tool. Vague promises, soft blue colors, a smiling stock photo of people who have never actually seen a spreadsheet. I started filling it out. My fingers hovered over the incident description box and then stopped. I realized I didn't want to be anonymous. Anonymous people get buried. Anonymous people misunderstood the data or misinterpreted actions. Anonymous people can't refuse to sign things because no one knows who they are. If I was going to do this, my name would be attached to the truth, or I wouldn't do it at all. That thought scared me more than Carter's ultimatum. Back inside, he ramped up the pressure. He started looping me into more of the vendor deals, forwarding me threads half finished with, "Daniel will finalize numbers." Every time I pushed back, he replied with something that sounded reasonable on the surface. We're aligning projections with strategic targets. We're smoothing temporary volatility. Don't get lost in the weeds. He CC'd me on an email to his boss calling me critical to the success of our reporting story this quarter. I stared at that phrase, our reporting story, like it was written in another language. There shouldn't be a story. There should be numbers. And then he did something that told me exactly where I stood. He sent an email to HR requesting a performance check-in for me. I wasn't copied, of course. The HR rep accidentally mentioned it later, assuming I knew. "We'll just review expectations," she said with that calm, rehearsed voice. "Carter's concerned you might be under a lot of stress." Concerned? Right. That night, I bought a cheap voice recorder at a pharmacy on the way home. Nothing dramatic. $29, plastic, fits in a pocket. I put it on the receipt with groceries so it wouldn't look like anything special. The next day, when Carter called me into his office to align on Q3 messaging, I set my phone face down on the table and slid the recorder into my palm under my notebook. It felt stupid, paranoid, over the top. It also felt like the first adult decision I'd made in months. "Daniel," he said, "I need you to be clear. We're not falsifying anything. We're just presenting the most optimistic version of where we can land. Everyone does this." "Everyone?" I asked. "Everyone who wants to keep their investors calm. Even if that means the numbers aren't accurate?" He exhaled through his nose, annoyed. "Accurate is flexible before close. You know that. You've been here long enough." He kept talking. I kept nodding. Inside, I was counting the seconds on a file I hadn't even saved yet. After that meeting, I started quietly building my own little archive. Original reports, the versions he edited, emails where he suggested changes, screenshots with timestamps, a PDF of the company's own ethics policy with the lines about accurate reporting highlighted. At first, it felt like overkill. Then he tried to throw me under the bus in front of his peers. We were on a video call with the regional directors, walking through a slide deck for the quarter. One of the graphs didn't match the numbers in their regional tools. Small discrepancy, but visible. "Looks like there's a mismatch here," one director said. "Where did this uplift come from?" Carter didn't miss a beat. Daniel handled the adjustments. He may have misapplied one of the allocations. "We'll review." It was subtle, polite, a tiny seed of doubt planted in front of people who signed my review. I could have stayed quiet, let it roll, fix it later. Instead, I unmuted my mic. "Just to clarify," I said, keeping my voice even, "the original file I sent last week had the lower figure. The uplift came after your note, Carter. I have both versions saved if anyone wants to see the changelog." The silence on the call was immediate. You could almost hear the directors sit back. Carter smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Right," he said. "My mistake." I asked Daniel to reflect the most updated risk assumptions. "We'll make sure the labels are clearer." The moment passed. They moved on. Slide 11, slide 12. Next headache. But something shifted. Not for them, for him. For the first time since I'd known him, Carter had to walk back a comment in front of others, using my words. When the call ended, he didn't call me in. He didn't email. He just walked past my desk hours later and said quietly, "We need to be aligned in front of leadership, Daniel." "We need to be accurate in front of leadership," I replied, just as quietly. He stared at me for a second too long, then walked away. That night, sitting again at the kitchen table, I opened a new folder on my personal drive. Not on the company network. Not on my work laptop. Mine. I named it something boring. Nothing anyone would click out of curiosity. Inside, I started dropping copies. Audio files, PDFs, screenshots. The story he was building and the truth he was trying to bury. Side by side. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like insurance. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with it yet, or how far this would go. I only knew one thing with absolute certainty. That quiet little folder was going to end someone's career. I just had to decide if I was willing to let it take mine with it. The strange thing about corruption is how ordinary it looks from the inside. Meetings, emails, quick syncs, spreadsheets with color-coded cells. Nothing screams danger until someone turns off the lights and asks you to trust that they know where the exit is. 2 weeks after I started my quiet archive, things escalated fast. Not in fireworks, more like a slow tightening of invisible wire. First sign, I got removed from 2 meetings I'd led for years. Calendar invites vanished without explanation. When I asked Carter, he didn't even look up from his monitor. Trying something new with team structure, he said. Focus on the projections. Leave the cross-functional stuff to others. Second sign, suddenly my name appeared in emails as an afterthought. Not, Daniel will lead this, but keep Daniel looped for awareness. Awareness. The corporate equivalent of telling someone to sit in the hallway while adults talk. Third sign, HR reached out again, this time with a soft, patronizing check-in. We'd like to understand how you're handling workload changes. Carter mentioned you might be overwhelmed. Overwhelmed? That was how he framed it. He was pulling the rug out from under me and telling HR I tripped. I played along. I nodded in the meeting. I smiled. I thanked them for support. Meanwhile, at home, my quiet folder kept growing like a tumor they didn't know they had. But the real shift came on a Thursday morning. A message popped into my inbox. Internal audit. Notification of scope review. Just those words. No explanation. My pulse kicked. Audit reviews happen, but not random, not at quarter end, and not on the exact accounts tied to our mystery vendor. And definitely not without Carter mentioning it. Within an hour, auditors arrived on our floor. Buttoned shirts, laptops, badges swinging. They took over conference room B like a quarantine zone. Carter pretended it was routine. Nothing to worry about, he told the team too casually. They're checking some vendor compliance items. He didn't look at me once. By noon, he called me into his office. Not the calm Carter, not the charming one, the calculating one. I need you to clean up a few files, he said, sliding a list across the desk. Old versions, drafts, anything that might confuse audit. Confuse, he said, not mislead, not invalidate. Which files? I asked, though I already knew. Just the working ones, he said, the ones with messy assumptions. He wanted me to delete evidence. I kept my voice steady. I keep everything. It's part of my process. Then change your process, he snapped. That was the first crack in his composure. I didn't argue. I didn't refuse. I simply said, send it in writing. He didn't. Hours later, one of the auditors, Lisa, someone I vaguely remembered from 2 years back, asked to speak with me privately. Her tone wasn't hostile, but it wasn't friendly either. We're reviewing contracts with Northbridge suppliers, she said. We're seeing irregularities. Your name appears in several email threads. We need to understand your involvement. My throat tightened, not from guilt, but from the weight of the moment. I'll answer anything, I said, but I want to be precise. Her eyebrows lifted. Most employees babble, panic, protect themselves. I was calm. That alone told her something. She opened her laptop. Let's start with the forecasts. I reached into my bag, pulled out a small USB drive, and set it on the table. I have the original files, I said quietly, before revisions. For a second, she didn't move. Her eyes flicked from the drive to my face, trying to decide what story she'd just walked into. Why do you have these? She asked. Because the changes weren't mine. Silence. Controlled, heavy silence. Then she said what I'd been waiting months to hear. Walk me through everything. For the next hour I did, carefully, calmly. Not as a victim, not as a hero, just as a man who finally stopped drowning and started swimming upward. I showed her the timestamps, the version histories, the emails where Carter suggested edits that magically matched the inflated numbers later presented to leadership, the approvals that bypassed procurement guidelines, the vendor contracts with mismatched signatures, and then my ace, the recording. not the whole conversation. Just the part where Carter said, "Accurate is flexible before close. Investors don't need noise." Lisa's face didn't change, but her posture did. She straightened. She typed faster. She asked more precise questions. When we finished, she closed her laptop. "Daniel, thank you." Those words almost broke me. I hadn't heard them from anyone at work in years. But Carter must have sensed something shifting because the next morning, HR called me again, this time with no smiles. "Effective immediately, you're being placed on a temporary performance review hold, pending further evaluation." Temporary hold, further evaluation. That's corporate language for, "We're prepping your exit paperwork." They asked for my badge. They asked me to pack essential personal items only. HR walked me to my desk like I was a risk to office furniture. Co-workers watched without watching, eyes flicking up, then away. Only one person, Sam from procurement, whispered, "Man, I'm sorry." I nodded. I didn't blame them. No one wants to lean towards someone falling. In the elevator down, HR talked about process and proper channels and best outcomes. I didn't hear any of it because I wasn't falling. I was done being quiet. I got into my car, sat there for 30 long seconds, and then drove, not home, not to Wallow, but to a small office downtown where the lights were always on and doors always locked. A whistleblower law firm. I'd already spoken to them once, anonymously. This time I walked in using my name. The attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Patel, looked up from her monitor as I stepped inside. "You ready?" she asked. I placed the USB drive on her desk, the same one I'd handed to audit. "More than ready," I said. She nodded once. "Let's get started." And as she plugged the drive in, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not victory, not relief. Freedom. They thought walking me out with a cardboard box was the end of my story. For the first time in years, stepping back into the sunlight, I finally understood. I wasn't working for them anymore. I was working against them. Months passed, though not in the dramatic movie montage way people imagine. Real life doesn't hand you resolution in one big moment. It arrives quietly. Paperwork first. The first sign that the ground was shifting came in the form of an email forwarded by a former co-worker. Effective immediately, Carter Willis has been placed on administrative leave pending internal review. No details. Companies never print details, but I could read the subtext like a man who had lived inside it too long. Administrative leave was the waiting room before termination, a place where people sit while lawyers decide which version of the story the company will officially remember. I didn't celebrate. I didn't screenshot it and send it to friends. I just stared at the line for a long moment, breathing in the simple fact that this time the consequences weren't landing on me. The next week, Patel, the attorney, called me. "They're cooperating," she said. "Internal audit turned everything over to regulators. They're motivated to resolve this cleanly." "Cleanly," I repeated. "Meaning," she continued, "they're attempting to separate themselves from the individuals involved. Carter is the first. He won't be the last." I expected satisfaction. What I felt instead was quiet. Maybe that's what justice really is. Not fireworks, but the absence of noise. 3 days later, I received a formal letter from the company's legal team. It was professional, polished, cold. They acknowledged my cooperation. They confirmed I was not the subject of any investigation. They offered a settlement package to support a smooth transition. Lump sum, benefits extension, neutral reference, no apology, of course. Corporations don't apologize. They negotiate, but my name was clear, on paper, permanently. I signed the documents at Patel's office, handed her the pen back, and felt something unclench in my chest that I didn't know had been tight for years. A week after that, Carter disappeared from the company website. His bio, his photo, his list of achievements, all wiped clean. The director who'd protected him retired to pursue personal interests, which is HR speak for, left because staying would be worse. Rumors trickled to me through former coworkers. Carter had tried to blame his team. Audit shut that down fast. He tried to argue industry norms. Regulators didn't care. He tried to negotiate a quiet departure. Leadership refused. He walked out of the same building he once ruled, not with a promotion, but with an escort from HR. I wasn't there to see it. I didn't need to be. That chapter wasn't mine anymore. My own life rearranged itself slowly, like furniture shifted an inch at a time. At first, I didn't know what to do with my days. I woke up early, out of habit. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, not to fight a spreadsheet, but to taste the quiet for once. I cleaned my apartment, fixed a wobbly cabinet door, replaced a bulb I'd ignored for months. Little things, small repairs, proof that life still moves somewhere outside that office tower. Patel referred me to a few companies looking for someone with my background. Someone ethical, she said. Someone careful. It was strange hearing those words used as selling points instead of liabilities. I interviewed with a smaller firm. 12 people, no sprawling hierarchy, no polished lies. The hiring manager asked me why I left my previous employer. I told him the truth without the drama. I didn't want my name on numbers that weren't real. He nodded once like I'd given the only answer he respected. They hired me the next day. The office was modest. 2 floors, old carpet, windows that stuck in the winter, but people greeted each other. Leadership actually explained decisions. When I asked questions, no one said I was overthinking. My first week there, I opened a blank spreadsheet and felt something I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't bracing for the moment someone asked me to make it prettier instead of accurate. I was just doing my job. One afternoon, sitting at my new desk with the mild hum of the building around me, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Second buzz, third. I declined. A minute later, the voicemail icon lit up. I didn't need to listen. I knew who it was. Tessa from HR, Becca, someone from Carter's old circle, maybe even Carter himself. Doesn't matter. Whatever they wanted belonged to a world I wasn't part of anymore. I deleted the notification without opening it. Peace isn't dramatic. It's the absence of drama. A month later, I was walking back from lunch when Sam, my old co-worker, called. "You hear about Carter?" he asked. "No. He's consulting. Some small contract outfit out of state. Word is he's rebuilding, but it's not the same. He looks rough, man. People who used to follow him don't return his calls." I didn't ask for details. I didn't need to. "Good luck to him," I said simply. Sam hesitated. "You're really okay, huh?" "I'm better," I said, and I meant it. When I got home that evening, I put my briefcase on the table. The same briefcase I'd grabbed the day Carter gave me his ultimatum. The same one I carried into Patel's office. The same one I no longer needed as a shield. I opened it. Empty. No hidden folders. No secret recordings. No copies printed in fear. Just a pen and a notebook. I closed it and placed it on the shelf. Later, standing by the window with a cup of coffee, I thought about that day in Carter's office, the blinds closing, the folders sliding toward me, his voice pretending to offer me a choice. "Support this," he said, "or resign." But he'd forgotten a third option, walk away and make sure the truth doesn't walk with him. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the story settle into place. Every thread tied off, nothing left hanging. He told me to either stand behind his scheme or leave. I smiled, grabbed my briefcase, and chose something he never imagined. I walked away, and the scheme didn't.